So our purpose is learning about the RDSS, but also consulting and giving back to a little bit back to just for consultation purposes. And so I gave you 3 questions, and you've each got a sort of set of answers to each one. And I think rather, so we could do the kind of slow death round the room of every table feeding back their view, but I think we might do it just slightly differently, just to keep us all kind of on our toes a little bit. So let me start. We'll do them by question rather than by table. How about that? Yeah? And so let's do them by question. Let's maybe start. This table here seems to have been the most productive, lively discussion and debate. Who knows what about? And we'll find out now. So the first question, which reflects a little bit on what we heard from Chris first thing this morning. The first question was, what is going to change, especially in your institutions or your disciplines, the sector you know best? What is going to change over the next 5 years that implicitly that RDSS and all of us indeed need to be thinking about? I wonder if we could get someone from the table to share your thoughts. Sarah will ferry the microphone right to you. There's a screed of notes, and we'll keep those. Hope you don't mind. We'll share them. We won't name people in case there's typos or handwriting issues. We accept that. But a few thoughts to the camera, and then we'll share the notes afterwards, if that's okay.
We thought one thing was the scale of the problem is just going to get much bigger because there's going to be more data. There's going to be more people producing the data, and how we actually manage it is just going to be a bigger challenge in the future. We think there's going to be an increased gap between our ability to manage data and the rate that it's being produced as well. So very pessimistic outlook so far. We think all researchers are going to start to consider data management at all parts of the process, and we're hoping that will be a positive thing, that they'll start to consider it earlier, and that will feed into costings and funding as well. We think there are going to be more defined policies and requirements coming from outside of our institutions as well, and there's also going to be more overlap with ethics and privacy. We think it's going to become business as usual as well for the people producing the data to think about management preservation. And we think the expectations on data management services are going to increase. So this is expectations from the people using our services, the researchers. They're going to want more real-time access to sort of analyse the data where it sits in situ without downloading it, as mentioned earlier. More visualisation, costing models. Researchers might want to actually charge for people to access their data and make some money out of it. Commercialising it, sort of commercialising data publication.
Thank you very much. That's a good long list. We started with the right group. They were working hard after all. So thank you very much. We'll go around the room now with that same question, but hopefully maybe there's a few things shared from that list that you can knock off the list from the table at the back. So the same question then, what is going to change over the next 5 years?
Thank you. So what we had here is pretty much the same thing, a lot of the same things. First of all, this notion of research data management infrastructure becoming more embedded with institutions, and perhaps, this is importantly, standardized. Increased capacity in support is something we're going to be seeing, and greater volume of data being produced. But it actually raises the question, yes, greater volumes are being produced, but are they going to be usable? That means we need to think more about curation and maybe levels of curation, different approaches to curation to allow more to actually not just be preserved, but to be accessible and usable. We have got the question marks, possibly opportunities, possibly not, caused by REF 2021, Brexit. Possibly this is a future, as I say, these could be things, opportunities or recessions affecting funding. And we finished off with consideration of, again, the importance of curation and the need for better documentation as part of the preservation and ongoing RDM approach to handling data.
Thank you very much. We'll come to the table at the back. maybe the question isn't what did you have, maybe the question is there anything else or any emphases you would choose to give to what you've heard before rather than a full report?
Well, we had Brexit on there. I think nobody knows how that's going to go. We also thought about GDPR, specifically around privacy and the different levels of privacy and how that'll add complexity. We also had data, quantity, which other people have said. But around quantity as well, maybe a shift from advocacy to access and guidance. And we also thought about the sort of conceptualization of data and the idea of discrete data sets becoming redundant and maybe more linkage and the idea of a big pool of data. We also had the ref on there with new recommendations coming out of that, which might make research data sort of more important. And we sort of finished off with expectations around support using data and how that might become more important.
Thank you very much. And then lastly, the same question really here. I've kind of put you last deliberately because Chris and Paul are kind of on it already. I mean, thinking about this pretty hard. But is there anything you want to emphasise or add to what you've heard?
Well, obviously all the best ideas we also had. I just don't repeat them. But I think we want to say. I think we talked about institutional processes and they're going to need to be updated. Let's perhaps still aren't reflecting how the world's changing. I think that's something which we discussed. Yes.
Thank you very much. Okay, so that's a good long set of things for us to think about. The point of this exercise, by the way, is that in about half an hour or so, of sort of after coffee break, Paul, I'm guessing it says Dom Fripp here, but I saw a message on Twitter this morning saying that he was in Montana. So that'll be one heck of a journey. Anyway, I'm guessing Paul's going to give us a word or two about the plans around the RDSS. So we've given Paul about half an hour to feature all your thoughts in his presentation to show that they're all catered for. Thank you. Question 2 then. Let's break things up a little bit. Let's start at the back of the room this time. Question 2 is about what needs to happen. So we've identified some of the challenges. Second question is about the actions that need to follow. So can we? Let's break things up and start at the back. What needs to happen to enable sustainable access to data?
Sorry. So one of the things we've got down that needs to change is the sort of how data is viewed in an academic's mind as rather than just a stuff that you put somewhere as this pool of resources that you can actually go and use and then query effectively. A large amount of IT architecture needs to be put in place in a lot of places to support these kinds of processes we've been talking about. Costs need to stay really manageable, and we discussed how the major cost of things at the moment is around man hours. So by automating a lot of the grunt work, the idea is to keep that low. We've got also written computer-aided decision-making. That was sort of around processes were mentioned in the things that are likely to change. If those can be as non-manual as possible, with computers helping human experts make the decision, then that's obviously going to be a lot better. And then the last two we've got are trust and cyber cops. For basically what we were discussing here was the more and more sensitive data being deposited, and if you start linking data sets in a way that's really good for discovery and queries, you need to have a lot of trust in the system, and you need to have policing of how that system is used to make sure it's not abused at all.
It's fantastic. I'm almost tempted to try a wee exercise. I'll do it later, but there's a wee think piece I'd like to put together for us about that first question you said about the technical infrastructure that needs to be put together, because it can link a couple of issues, but I'll hold on to that. I'll do that after we've heard from the other group. So let's get our second group at the back on that same question, and the question is what needs to happen to enable sustainable access to data?
Okay, so for this question, we started by thinking about metadata, the importance of metadata and documentation, especially as this can often be a different kind of documentation which many data creators are used to working with. It's talking about, you know, sending their data into the future, preserving their data, allowing access to others. So sometimes it's novel, you know. Then also one of my colleagues here mentioned the importance of developing various business cases in order to kind of sell these services to management. You know, the need to sustain and develop and continue to evolve and fund these services. So senior management will need to kind of see the benefits of actually doing this. So that's why we have a business case. It also led on to a brief discussion about the need to maybe have better costings of curation available. Maybe informed by, you know, common methods as well, which can kind of share with a wider community. Other issues, perhaps there needs to be a move back towards a more centralized system. You know, the last few years have been moving towards a more sort of siloed, decentralized system with institutional repositories at institutions, obviously. But maybe we need to move back towards something that actually kind of allows more connection, collaboration. So again, we get this kind of emerging thing of, you know, sharing of methods, sharing of approaches, being more connected. There's also a talk of, inclusion talk of maybe encouraging Dryad-style deposits or integrated systems, where again, this data management isn't introduced to researchers as kind of discrete, separate sections of a life cycle, but rather it's actually all part of the same kind of continuum as far as they're concerned, because they work within a particular research environment or something where they can simply output data at appropriate time. That's what we finished on.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We'll come round to this table here now. The question at this point really is if you have anything to add to what you've heard or any other particular emphases you want to give to the notes you've got in front of you. So say it doesn't have to be a full report, but...
We talked a bit about peer reviewing data. So we were talking a lot about the human side of this, so less the others where they were talking about technical and computing facilities, but we were thinking about how we're actually going to cope with checking everything that's coming in, peer reviewing it, and we also talked a lot about more specialist data librarians as well, being involved directly with researchers. In terms of preservation, we've also been talking quite a bit about different file formats and the diversity of file formats that are being produced, and we can't keep up with that and how we're going to preserve those in the longer term as well. And also training, I think, has been covered a little bit, both for researchers and for us. I think we need better skills as a community, and also evidence of the benefits of doing this to the researchers. So we had a talk about fewer sticks and sharper carrots. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Anna. And a special prize to the first carrot and stick reference of the day. And then finally, again, back to this table, are there any points to add or any emphasis or indeed any points of disagreement with what you've heard before?
I mean, key ones very briefly, having accountability. Someone needs to take ownership of preservation in the institution. Skills courses, time and again, an issue in this area. So it needs to be improved. Curation also needs more resourcing, and documentation of research. Is there anything else anyone wanted to... and more procedures or... where are we? And protocols around what happens when the ownership of the data, someone's moved on, changed jobs, etc.
Fantastic, thank you very much. So we'll do the final question now, which is, if you like, the tiebreaker question more than anything for RDSS. What could RDSS do for you that's going to help that long-term access? What's going to make a difference over 5 years? Maybe for this time we'll start, for the sake of moving things around, we'll start in the back corner first, and then I'll pick at random as we go.
Okay, we have 4 main things for this one. First of all, affordability. Is it going to be affordable? Is it going to be too expensive? As part of that equation, it isn't simply cost, it's actually, what are the benefits? So we need, again, this thing of selling it to management. and making it seem affordable. Is it going to be easy to use? Interoperable. Is it actually going to be interoperable in a meaningful way? And then finally, future-proofing. In two aspects. It will need to cope with past formats, but also will it be able to kind of cope and keep up a pace with new formats as they emerge as well? So again, that's those two facets of future-proofing, past formats and future ones.
Thank you very much. Should we go to this table? I'm just trying to give Sarah the longest walk possible. Should we try this table here?
Yes, so we started off with guidance and leadership around advocacy to access. So that's not just it being a good technological solution, but also just really leading the advocacy of research data management in general. And then again, as well as providing the software and the infrastructure to do this, to provide skills and training to make sure that people in institutions remain up to date with how things are going to work and can actually use the software successfully, and whatever training is needed around that. And also to provide support and ongoing updates to the system around sort of the question marks from the first question. I guess that's things like whatever Brexit means and ref changes and any implications those have. The service needs to remain active and be updated for those.
Thank you. They will come here. You see a small pattern emerging, at least. I'm keeping you guys.
We talked about it being standardised in terms of the fields, the workflow and the roles, so that if researchers move between institutions, they don't have to learn an entirely new system. We also talked about improved discoverability and research functions, and that being really important so people can find the data and reuse it, which links back to the benefits and evidence of an impact of data sharing. We also talked about it would be nice to have some sort of visualization of the data, like a preview of the data set without having to download it would be quite nice functionality. Good admin fields to help us manage the data going forwards, and not necessarily just the fields that the researchers or the depositors are filling in. And also good guidance and good practice on how we preserve and review data that's going in there as well.
Thank you very much. And then, so finally, again, anything to add or emphases to put on what you've heard?
Hello again from the last table. So briefly, large file uploads with checksums and things like that for large data sets. Stuff around metadata for different disciplines, which will have different needs for metadata, and that should be flexible so that people see the right kind of metadata fields based on the discipline or the area they're in. And just to, again, this interoperability theme, sharing data and data sets with the right subject repositories and aggregators so that you can put it in one place and it gets shared around. Is there anything else I think I've missed out there? No? Okay, cool.
Sorry, the feed needs there was one point that was made on our table by Francis. I think this was something that perhaps the RDSS is not able to provide, but something that I thought it was a really good point about advocacy and lobbying to promote open standards in areas where manufacturers are making equipment and things like that, which is producing things in closed and proprietary formats. So, yeah, I thought that was a really important thing for the future, but again, yes.
I'll never leave a meeting without an action point. It's just depressing. It is a DPC role. I mean, so if there are particular industries you have in mind, then let us know. Some of you have heard me talking about the 3D laser scanning industry before. That keeps me busy, and I try to keep them busy. Exactly that question. But if there are other particular topics, then very happy to try and pick that up as an advocacy role. So listen, thank you all very much for that feedback, which we will capture. We've got the feedback from the room, but we'll take the sheets as well. And all of this is going to find its way by hook or by crook into Paul's kind of filing cabinets as part of his consultation. I want to try a wee exercise now then. We've got coffee coming. I guess we'll aim for coffee at 1:45. That gives us a wee bit of a head, wee head start, as it were. But I want to do one final little exercise with you, which is, I think it's called silent bingo. I think this is actually what it's called. And what I need you to all do, first of all, is I need you all to stand up. Okay? Just try this, okay? I need you all to stand up. Come on. Yeah. Okay, now I want you all to, if you feel safe doing it, close your eyes. And I want you to imagine all the money that your organisation, the time and money your organisation spends on research data management. Okay? Just try and work that out for yourself for a moment. And then we're going to pitch ourselves forward 5 years. Okay? In 5 years' time, so I'm going to ask you at various points to sit down, right? In 5 years' time, will you have, correcting for inflation and all, will you have less money to spend on research data management than you have now? If you do, sit down. One person sat down. Okay? Thinking forward 5 years. If in 5 years' time you're going to have around the same amount of money to spend on research data management, sit down. In 5 years' time, if you think you'll have maybe between 5 and 10% more money to spend on research data management, sit down. If you think that in 5 years' time you'll have between, 10 and 50% more money to spend on research data management, sit down. If you think that in 5 years' time you'll have between 50 and 100% more money to spend on research data management, sit down. Wake up. If in 5 years' time you think you'll have 100 to 200% more money to spend on research data management, sit down. There we are. Remember that research, our ability to generate data is increasing at 60% per year. Okay? So your institutions are generating data at 60% per year more, year on year. That means the right answer to that question, just pacing yourself according to data generation, is 300%. It's actually slightly more than that. Something like 300%. Yeah? And that seems to me actually why shared services are to some extent the inevitable conclusion for some of this. Because I just can't see us keeping pace with that volume of increase. Does anyone have any final observations to make in this feedback session? Please do. Sarah, sorry to keep you on your toes, can we get...
I think one thing that we've kind of forgotten this morning is how we make decisions about what to keep and getting rid of things as well. There's been an assumption that everything that's being created and coming our way we're going to be keeping forever.
Yes.
And I realise that in 5 years' time, we'll be hitting the 10-year mark for a lot of the data sets that came into our archive, and we're going to have to make decisions about whether we want to keep them or whether we actually destroy them and just keep the metadata record about them.
Yes.
And that's going to be a challenge as well, is making that decision in terms of the archive, and also our researchers making the decisions about what's valuable to them and what to keep.
That's a very, very good point, and this is very exciting news that there's going to be a bit of work on that disposal and retention question. Can I tell a story? Some of you heard me tell this story before, but it's good and it's true, which are two important characteristics for any story. Firstly, there's a little tool called Droid. There's a little tool called Droid which does file format characterization and also generates a checksum, which is a unique identifier for a file. And it's produced by the National Archives, and of course they really work on behalf of government departments. So they tried it out in a big government department, big Whitehall department in London. And they ran Droid through a data server by this big government department. And I'll get the numbers quite wrong, but the point of the story is still well made. That 10% of the data storage from this government department. 10% represented by one file. It happened to be the new management structure of the organisation. It was in a PowerPoint, which is a strange format to present such a thing. And it had been emailed to all staff. And because everyone's really anxious about their position in an organisation, everyone had saved their own copy. And it seems to me that just the deduplication job alone would be quite helpful in answering some or beginning some of those questions. But of course, it's by no means all. There's all sorts of other matters there. But we completely right. We shouldn't be necessarily keeping every complex or every duplicate of every file that we have ever generated. Sorry, Paul.
You haven't heard from me for at least 5 minutes, so I thought I'd join again. One underlying theme I think is coming out as well is that these problems will not be solved by individuals, they'll be solved collectively. And it does involve collective effort, sharing of resources, sharing of standards, sharing of protocols, and sharing of workflows and so on. So, and I see people like JISC and DPC as being in a position to facilitate that collective effort.